This week on Choice Hacking.
It came about when my daughters were very young, and Saturday was always Daddy's Day with the two daughters. I would take them to the merry-go-round, sit there while they rode the merry-go-round, sit on a bench eating peanuts. I felt that there should be something built where that the parents and the children could have fun together. That's how Disneyland started.
In 1954, Walt Disney decided to build a theme park called Disneyland. He had some pretty ambitious ideas, so he assembled an Avengers-level team of what he called Imagineers to do it. Over the past 70 years, the Imagineers have followed something called Mickey's 10 Commandments. And they're basically a cheat sheet for creating a customer experience that people obsess over. And no matter what you're designing, whether it's marketing, a digital experience, a retail shop, or hey, maybe a theme park of your own, there are brilliant psychological insights in Mickey's 10 Commandments that all of us can learn from and apply. I'm Jennifer CLINEHENS, and you're listening to Choice Hacking, a podcast about applying behavioral science and psychology to business, marketing, experience design, and more. Join me today for the second part of my two-part series on Disney. We're unpacking the psychology behind Mickey's 10 Commandments, the Disney Imagineers cheat sheet for creating amazing guest experiences in Disney parks, why they're important, and how you can apply their lessons to your business. But first, I want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this podcast, Choice Hacking, the agency. Did you know that Choice Hacking is more than just a podcast? We're also a customer experience consulting firm that can help you fascinate and engage users, drive revenue, and create emotional bonds with your brand that customers won't want to break. Choice Hacking clients range from startups just getting kicked off, all the way up to Fortune 100 brands that want to get an edge over their competition with applied psychology and behavioral science. Over their careers, our team has worked with brands like McDonald's, AT&T, Adidas, and Starbucks in markets across the world. And now they're bringing decades of experience to our work at Choice Hacking. If you're interested, let's chat. Just visit choicehacking.com/together to learn more. That's choicehacking.com/together. Now on to the show. Now, we covered the first 5 commandments in our first podcast, which I will link to in the show notes here. So we're going to start with number 6, and that is avoid overload. Disney wanted to create an immersive experience, but he didn't want to overload his guests with too much information or stimulus. Marty Sklar, the former international ambassador for Walt Disney Imagineering and an Imagineer himself, described their approach this way. Your first task on any new project is to learn as much as you can about the subject of your story or assignment. Your second task is to become a great editor. If they were asking customers to take in too much information, it could be easy for them to feel overwhelmed and exhausted instead of focusing on the goal of Disneyland, which is simply having fun with your family. Imagineer John Hench described Disney's approach to information and choice this way. When we come to a point in the park that we know is a decision point, we put 2 choices. We try not to give guests 7 or 8 so that they have to decide in a qualitative way which is the best of those. You just give them 2. Why did the Imagineers want to avoid giving guests too much choice? Well, one of the reasons is a behavioral science principle known as choice overload. The choice overload effect, also called overchoice, says that too many options can be a bad thing. They can confuse, overwhelm, and make it difficult to make a good decision. And once people do make their choice, they can feel disappointed because they feel like they're not sure if it's the right one. Although Disney didn't know it at the time, research shows that when there are too many options, customers feel anxious, emotionally disengaged, and can even become depressed. The next commandment is usually overlooked, but it's really important if you want customers to buy from you. Mickey's commandment number 7 is tell one story at a time. Walt Disney knew that good stories are clear, simple, logical, and consistent. Studies tell us that people prefer simplicity. They get turned off if you make them think too hard. Why was Disney so intent on guests being focused on one simple story at a time? Well, it's down to something called the simplicity theory. This principle says that people prefer experiences that minimize their cognitive load, the amount of information that we're asked to process at any given time. People don't want to think too hard about your experience because thinking is metabolically expensive. In other words, it's hard work and it uses a lot of calories. People would rather just avoid your brand altogether if it means less thinking. Consider the Apple Store. It's really obvious what story they're telling. They don't sell Apple t-shirts or show lots of inventory in the store. Apple want you focused on the story at hand, that their products are innovative and easy to use. That's it. Anything else is a distraction, which leads us to our next principle. Commandment number 8 is maintain identity. This commandment means keeping your brand consistent. That means showing the same things over and over. Think about a brand like Coca-Cola. Their logo hasn't really changed for over 100 years. That repetition isn't boring. It actually makes a brand powerful. People remember it, they understand it, and they choose it over another one that they're not familiar with. It's down to something called the mere exposure effect. It says that the more times people see a message, a brand, or even a person, the more they like it. But if it's different every time they see it, they'll have a hard time building that exposure. It has to have consistency to get remembered. Think about Coca-Cola's logo. It's one of the most recognizable pieces of corporate identity in history. You might even go so far as to call it a piece of pop culture. And it has barely changed since 1891. That is more than 130 years of consistency. That approach created one of the world's most powerful brands, built on, arguably, a really weak product that's easily imitated and not very good for you. But if Coca-Cola had introduced a new rebrand every time they got a new CMO, it would have been much more of an uphill battle to get people to remember its brand. Next, we have what is probably my favorite commandment. Commandment number 9. For every ounce of treatment, provide a ton of fun. Customers are sometimes going to have to do things that aren't fun. So we have to balance that treatment with some entertainment. At Disney parks, one of the worst parts of the experience is standing in line for rides. But Disney's Imagineers are so good, they can even make standing in line fun. A principle called idleness aversion tells us that people are happier when they're busier, even if they're forced to be busy. So when you queue up for the Haunted Mansion ride at Disney World, for example, you're kept busy. You can play ghostly musical instruments, see books that fly from their shelves, and even solve a murder mystery while you wait. This last principle might be the hardest, but it's probably also the most important. The last of Mickey's 10 commandments is number 10. Keep it up. Now that you've got a great experience, you have to maintain it. Status quo bias says that once people get used to your normal experience, they'll feel a loss when something deviates from that norm. A great experience is definitely a double-edged sword. Customers love it, but they also get used to perfection. And if their experience isn't perfect every time, they're disappointed. Is it easy to create a great experience? Absolutely not. But as Walt Disney himself famously said, it's kind of fun to do the impossible. Thank you for listening to the Choice Hacking Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, it would be amazing if you shared it on social media. It takes me 20 plus hours to put together every episode, and it is a huge help when you share one with your LinkedIn, Twitter, or TikTok followers. And don't forget, you can learn more about behavioral science and psychology applied to business when you subscribe to the free Choice Hacking newsletter. You'll join more than 7,000 brilliant UX, CX, and marketing folks from companies like Disney, IKEA, and Coca-Cola who get my newsletter. To sign up, just visit choicehacking.com/subscribe. That's choicehacking.com/subscribe. Until next time.
Yeah, money clip us now. I hit record it, drop, you can't ignore it. I'm transforming now these cars and planes, I'm always boarding. Just out touring down in Charlotte like I play for Hornets.